Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Double Play Baseball. I'm Jack, he's Ryan, and we're joined by a very special guest today. You may know him as maybe the most outspoken Mets fan online. It's Giraffe Neck Marc. Marc, thank you so much for coming and joining us to talk about the Mets.
Dude, listen, like you said, most outspoken Mets fan. I love talking about this team. Maybe it's a little bit of a sickness, but I'm excited to talk with you guys today.
Yeah, excited to start some talk about the Mets today. They're one of the better teams in baseball, so I'm excited to, it's fun when we get to talk about teams that are going to compete in 2023, not like teams like the Nationals and A's like we've talked about before. But let's jump right into kind of the moves they made this offseason. That's where we start all these videos. Obviously, the big ones, they kept their in-house guys. It was Brandon Nimmo and Edwin Diaz. And then they replaced Jacob Degrom with Justin Verlander, which is a big one. That one, probably the biggest one of the offseason for me. They add Kodai Senga, who was one of the better pitching prospects who was available. Omar Narvaez at catcher, Tommy Pham to be depth in the outfield, start a little bit. Jose Quintana also in the rotation. David Roberts in the bullpen, Brooks Raley as well. Eliezer Hernandez, Adam Ottavino, and then obviously you get the Jeff McNeil extension as well. Busy on the addition side, and then you lose Jacob Degrom, Chris Bassett, Taijuan Walker all in the rotation, Seth Lugo as well. Bob Conforto, who I don't know if you can consider that as a loss, as hadn't played in a little bit. Dom Smith, Trevor May, James McCann, Trevor Williams, and then Joely Rodriguez as well. So very busy on both ends. Do either of you guys want to start? Which one was the biggest that kind of stood out to you as the most important addition or subtraction for this team?
I'll let Marc go.
I think that it's weird because it's not necessarily an addition, but I think Brandon Nimmo is such a vital part of this Mets roster. And the center field position in baseball is just so thin. There's not that many good players at that position. So what he brings offensively and defensively, I thought was going to be almost impossible for the Mets to really replace. So I'm glad that they brought him back. I know it's not necessarily an addition, but being able to have him out there every single day for 140, 150 games this year, I think is going to be the difference maker between the Mets being a good offensive team and a great offensive team.
Yeah, I'm kind of cheating. I think that Diaz and Nimmo coming back to the team is really huge because coming into the offseason, with all this rumors about Degrom, I still thought, they were going to lose two of those three of the in-house guys. So the fact that they were able to bring back both Nimmo and Diaz, and they weren't done after that, but bringing back both of them, something that I really didn't see in the cards. And so being able to bring back two of the guys that are such big contributors, you have Diaz pitching better than he ever has, and Nimmo, who is one of the more underrated outfielders in baseball. I didn't see a world in which they brought both back, so it was really big that they were able to retain both, in my opinion.
I went on the pitching side. I went Justin Verlander for the biggest one.
It's a good one.
Just because usually when we're doing these, I don't really like, or I don't highlight as the most important ones when you're bringing somewhere where you also lost one. But to me, losing Degrom almost felt like a given going into this offseason. There was a lot of talk of him potentially going to the Braves, and he doesn't go to the Braves, but still leaves them the bets. So to be able to replace him with Justin Verlander, who just wins a Cy Young, is just so huge for me. And to pair him with Scherzer, it's just the ceiling there for that rotation is the best in baseball if they're able to stay healthy. And then you add Kodai Senga, Jose Quintana as well. There's just so much potential for that rotation. Quintana had a good last year. So, I mean, they were top 5 in ERA and FIP last season, and I think their ceiling is higher than that, as crazy it sounds, being a top 5 rotation in baseball, and you could be better than that. So I think that's what they can do in 2023.
Yeah, with Verlander too, the thing that makes him so valuable is that Degrom, as we know, when he's healthy, will be the best pitcher in baseball. I don't think there's a question about that, but the health is the question. He hasn't been healthy for the last 2-3 seasons, where Verlander just came off of one of the best years of his career off of Tommy John surgery. So seemingly, all things knock on wood here, he should be healthy this year, and you can rely on more innings from him than you probably could from Jacob Degrom for a rotation that needs someone who can eat some innings up. And yeah, he's someone, like, how many teams get to say they lose the best pitcher in baseball and fill in with a Cy Young Award winner? Not many.
I don't think it almost feels like, it's hard to say. I mean, you're losing Degrom, but like you said, because of the health, it almost feels like an upgrade for the Mets.
Yeah.
I think it's hard, and I think, they could easily, one or the other could be better this season, but I think you're right. The only thing that I know, it's just Jacob Degrom's a big loss, I think, morally, just for the fan base. Obviously, he's one of the most beloved players that has played for the Mets in recent memory, and I know Verlander's obviously a fan favorite as well, and I'm sure that he'll make his own mark in a Mets uniform, but there was part of me that said it is big for the the front office and the clubhouse losing a guy like Degrom, who's been a poster child for the Mets recently, but also you do remove that one question of everyone comes in as, well, is Jacob Degrom going to be healthy? When's he going to be back? The drama that surrounds it all. So I think it was kind of a wash, and good on them for being able to go out and replace Degrom after losing him. If you had to give the Mets a grade overall for the offseason, Mark, where would you go?
I mean, I'm just going to give them an A. I think when you're a team that wins 101 games in the previous year, it's hard to get better, but I think there's a world where they did improve. They got some more bullpen depth. I know you lost Trevor May and some other arms, but the bullpen depth is still really strong. I think one thing that me and my podcast co-host talk a lot about on our podcast is that you have to build a full 26-man roster, and weirdly enough, we bring up the Giants, especially that 2021 season, where they literally, everybody that was on that roster every single day was being used. And that was something that I feel like a lot of teams had not been doing. You have, the backup catcher, or you have the fourth outfielder, maybe not making an impact, but I think the Mets really built like 30, 35 guys strong throughout this, 40-man roster that they're going to carry. And that's something to me that makes me feel confident, because when you look at all the teams that have been successful, everybody gets injuries. Someone's going to get hurt. Someone's going to miss time. You need someone who can fill in and step up. And I think the Mets did that, along with filling in for Jacob Degrom, bringing in Kodai Senga, Jose Quintana, Brandon Nimmo's back. Like they just got the right pieces in the right place around a really good core of guys already.
Yeah, I went with an A as well, and I've been pretty strict with giving out A's. I haven't just been throwing them around like the Phillies. I didn't give an A, even though they had Trey Turner, who was one of the better ones. So I go with an A, probably one of two I'm going to give out. I was kind of thinking about who deserves an A. So the Mets get an A here. I mean, obviously, you mentioned all the big pickups and how they're so deep in pretty much bullpen, lineup, and rotation. So it's just, there's so many players that can step in. I'm looking at the Fangraphs projected roster right now. I mean, you get Tommy Pham, who's been a starter for so much. He's going to be on the bench. Darren Ruff, I know he wasn't great with the Mets, but he was good with the Giants. So if he's able to be half of that coming off the bench for the Mets, I mean, there's a lot of ways. And then you get Alvarez coming up from catcher at some point as well.
Yep.
If he can perform right away, I mean, that there's no holes in that lineup. So that combined with the pitching depth, I just think that's the biggest thing. So like you said, you lose DeGrom, you lose a couple other guys, but you still improve. So yeah, I'm going with an A.
Well, I'm going with an A too, and it's crazy to think that this is an A after losing out on Carlos Correa, who everyone thought that the Mets had signed for a long time, and that's even crazier. That would have been an A+ for sure. But maybe they dodge a bullet. Who knows? We've been talking about it with the Giants and the Mets, and who knows? Maybe even the Twins. Correa's a risk, but still getting an A despite losing probably a top 5 free agent after signing him. The Mets just did a great job, and like both of you guys mentioned, they had the big pieces in Verlander and bringing back Diaz and Nimmo, and I like some of their smaller moves. Senga could end up being one of the more underrated signings this offseason out of Japan. You have Omar Narvaez, who's been an all-star catcher before. Tommy Pham, as you mentioned, Ryan's been a starter. And then I liked what they added in the bullpen, bringing in David Robertson, Brooks Raley, probably not guys that are going to perform like Edwin Diaz, but they're guys that you can count on, and they're going to be consistent. And for a team like the Mets, who for years has kind of looked like they're going to make it, and then something falls apart, adding as many consistent guys, and like you mentioned, Marc, filling out every single spot on the roster with someone that you can rely on, that's a big deal.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's really nice, because in previous years for Mets fans, we know the guys who ended up getting called up because of the injuries, and you're like, who? Like, we were living in the retirement home, signing Adrian Gonzalez when he was clearly done, Jose Bautista when he was clearly gone. Carlos Gomez has played like a good chunk of the season. Jose Reyes stuck around forever. So it's good that we're actually getting like really good players to be those guys now to fill in, which is very refreshing as a Mets fan.
And it seems like almost all these guys you're signing too are like, for the most part, at the top of their game. Like you said, you're not getting any of those guys towards the end of their career, and it doesn't even feel like a combination of, okay, you got your core, and then you've got some young guys, and then you've got some older veterans. I feel like most of these guys are kind of at their top level of play right now.
It's crazy that you can have a guy like Justin Verlander, who many would say like maybe towards the end of his career, but also still in a mini prime. They've got Max Scherzer like that too. And then, I mean, a lot of their players that we've talked about, Francisco Lindor probably in his prime, Pete Alonso probably entering his prime, Brandon Nimmo entering his prime, Edwin Diaz probably in his prime. Like, there's so many of these guys that the Mets have at the right spot. And so to get into what to expect for the Mets in 2023, I think they win 100 games again. And I think that they're a roster that is even better than they were last year. And it's a team that could very well, if not the Braves playing so well and the Dodgers playing so well, could easily in any other year be the best record in the National League. And I think they're going to be right up there in that conversation again. Hands down a playoff team. We'll see if they get that NL East crown. I don't want to make you spoil your prediction at all, Mark, but I think that it's pretty clear that they're going to be in that 100-win range, and I think they get there again.
Yeah, I fully expect them to win the National League East. Pick them to win the World Series every year. Weirdly, I don't pick them to win the National League East every year. I didn't pick them last year either. Still got to beat the Braves, but they should. The expectation is that they should win the National League East, that they should win, be a World Series team. They should be a contender. So all the pressure is definitely on their shoulders, but all these guys, they've now had a year under their belt of playing with the target on their back like they did last season. Obviously didn't end the way that they wanted it to, but all signs lead to this team should be one of the best in baseball. The only thing that scares me is just the fact that the division's so good and the season's so long. Phillies got better. Braves are still awesome. I don't know if you can beat 101 because I think there's just better teams now. But in the same regard, just because they don't win 101, I still think they could probably take the division. And I have them more in that 96, 97 range. And that's me trying to also be a little bit calm because it's so easy to get crazy hype about this team.
That's what I try and do with the Dodgers every year.
Yes.
but it sucks for the Mets that they have this good of a team right now and they have to be in probably the best division in baseball. And so, there's such a difference, as we saw just last year, between winning the division and having to play in a wild card series, especially when you're the top wild card and you're going to have to play probably the second team in the NL West, which is another probably team that should have won a division probably in most other divisions. So there's such a big difference, and I'm expecting them to be in another heated race. I don't know if I can say one way or another. I'm actually kind of leaning Braves as my pick to win it, but I think it's going to be another close race where it can come down to the last weekend of the series again. And I think it's going to be either they're playing for the 1 seed if they win it, or they're going to be in another wild card series, which, like I said, huge difference. So it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, a little stressful too.
Yeah. Well, I'll give credit to Ryan because we were on opposite sides. I said Mets all year last year. He said Braves, and I thought I had him up until that final weekend, and I'm sure you felt the same way too, probably a lot worse. But I think the Mets are one of those National League teams too that will benefit from the schedule changes, not having to play the Phillies and the Braves quite as much. And even the Marlins, if you run into a Sandy Alcantara start, can provide a loss. They had great other pitching as well. Nationals not so much, but some of these teams in the National League that are going to get to play a series against the teams in the AL Central, play a series or two against the A's, potentially even the Angels if they're on a losing skid. I think that'll be beneficial, especially for the Mets, who, as we mentioned, the NL East, probably the best division in baseball right now, probably one of the two Easts, but I think it'll be beneficial for them, and that's why I still think that they can win 100, even with the Phillies getting better and the Braves being as good as they are.
Yeah, I love the opportunity to play the Tigers and Royals, all those teams in the AL Central as much as possible.
Yeah. Let's get into bold predictions before we kind of wrap up our thoughts about the Mets. I'll start, and I think that you're going to see the Mets be very, very active at the trade deadline. I know a lot of the Mets fans think that Shohei Ohtani is going to be a Met in the future, and he very well could be, not saying he's going to get traded. But last year, the Mets made a couple moves, as we mentioned, Daniel Vogelbach and Darren Ruff, but they didn't really go all out at the trade deadline because they had Jacob Degrom coming back from injury. And I know a lot of Mets fans were saying, Jacob Degrom is our trade deadline acquisition. We're going to get him back. But I think this year, being that all the players are in their prime right now, some of their starting pitching is probably only a couple more years left, either in a Mets uniform or in MLB in general. This is the time. I'm not saying that the Mets have to win their World Series now, but you kind of get the feeling that this team and these next couple of years, it's going to be, if they win a World Series, it's going to be right now. So I think that they're going to try and be as active as possible at the trade deadline. Anyone that you see out there that's a big player, the Mets are going to have their name in the ring, because I think they're going to realize, Steve Cohen and everyone in that front office is going to realize this is their time to win, and they've got everyone in their prime now, so they're going to go all out.
I've been, for these predictions, I've been very team-oriented and kind of like record or playoff run, but like I was saying, with the NL East and with the National League in general, you got the Dodgers and Padres as well. It's so hard for me to predict what the outcome is going to be at the end of it. So I'm going to go to their lineup. I'm going to say they have the best offense in baseball by the end of the season by WRC+. So that's kind of my favorite metric to use. And they were third last year with 116. The Dodgers were number 1 with 119. And the Dodgers get a little bit worse on the lineup. and the team above them with the Blue Jays up by 1. So they're going to be close there, and I think they're going to get it this year.
I've kind of got 2 for you guys. I could even give you 3. There's 2 things that have recently happened that have made me really like get on those. But first one that I've been saying for the whole offseason, I think David Peterson is going to be like insanely important to this team. I think he's going to start off in the pen, kind of in like a Trevor Williams role last year, where he comes in and cleans up a couple innings, a little bit of a stretch, 6-man rotation maybe. But I think at some point, someone's going to go down with an injury. It's just destined to be. And I think David Peterson's going to come in and kind of just take over that role. We've seen him, his fastball velocity has increased. He's throwing the 4-seam a lot more. And the slider is just simply one of the best sliders in baseball, which is kind of crazy to say because this just seemingly came out of nowhere. It was always good, but the last year, it was just really unhittable, especially to righties. I just think that he's going to kind of know his role a little bit coming into the year, and it's going to just get more and more important. I think he could be one of the most important pitchers on the staff. And then the other 2 that I like to throw out there, I think Brett Baty for Rookie of the Year. I've just been absolutely in love with how he's been playing during spring training. I know it doesn't necessarily matter, but his swing is so good. The prospect guys have loved him ever since they really drafted him. He had some of the best batting practice at the Futures game a couple years ago. I think the sky's the limit for Brett Baty. I think he could be really good. And then this is the boldest of all the predictions I'll throw at you. I think Ronnie Mauricio gets called up this year, and I think Ronnie Mauricio has a absolute breakout where you're like, oh my God, like we have a problem. Where do we put this guy? We have to figure out where to play him. We have no spot. But he's been tearing up spring training. Granted, late in games, it's not against Major League pitching, but the exit velos are real. The pop is real. If he can just learn how to take a pitch every once in a while and get on base, you're talking about some crazy, crazy potential for a dude who's just a freak athlete.
The Mets have...
I'm with you. I'm with you on Mauricio. I was looking at that earlier today, but that was the same thing. Where do you put him if he breaks out? I mean, you've got a couple spots where he could go, but not at short with Lindor. So that's going to be something that I definitely think I could see happening, and he's been fun to watch, but that's the problem. Where do you go?
Yeah, the Mets have a lot of guys that I would want to put in that Rookie of the Year conversation, but then I'm thinking, is Brett Baty or Francisco Alvarez, Ronnie Mauricio going to get more time than maybe Jordan Walker in St. Louis or Corbin Carroll in Arizona? I wonder because is Alvarez going to play? Because the Mets have continued to add catchers despite him being at the top of the prospect list for forever. Brett Baty, is he going to get time? Would it be at third, you think? Or do you see them really getting much playing time?
To me, based on what I've been seeing, I think Brett Baty is probably going to start the year like at the major league level and do a bit of platoon with Eduardo Escobar. This is a personal thing. Eduardo Escobar's right-handed swing is just so much better. His quality of contact is just so much better right-handed than it is left-handed. And I think that's the perfect way to kind of let Brett Baty get a little more comfortable. Last year when he got called up, kind of just got thrown into it because they needed him. Let him get warmed up a little bit, let him face right-handed pitching, get comfortable. Maybe as he starts to play better, mixing a lefty here and there if Eduardo Escobar's struggling. I think that's the smartest way to handle it, and I would be shocked if the Mets don't go in with that mindset, especially with how he's been playing this far in spring.
Well, I mean, I think it's no secret the Mets are going to be one of the best teams in baseball this year. So the final question I have is Mets going to Met still a thing, and do you think it's something that's going to come back up in 2023?
I mean, I pray to God it does. I'm so tired of it. I've only experienced it for 27 years of my life, but boy, oh boy, do I absolutely hate it because it really is so true. I like to pretend like it's not a Mets thing, but every single year they really do find a way to. I mean, Mets gonna Met, lol Mets, but I'm trying to kill it. I'm trying to put an end to that. I'm hoping this is the year. I'm really hoping. And this team is so good. The ownership is different than the old Mets ownership. The front office is smarter. Everything leads you to believe that it should be ending. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes. This is the end of lol Mets. Although any chance someone gets, even for the slightest of things, they're still going to throw it out there.
Oh, well, there you go. That's what we're going to see, the end of lol Mets this year. So we'll see how it goes. The 2023 season is going to be fun, but that's all we have for today. Thank you, Marc, for joining us today. It was fun to talk about the Mets, and they're going to be one of the best teams in baseball, and they had one of the best off seasons. So this was a fun video to make and fun to watch what they do this year. So with that, we've been Double Play. Thank you, Marc, for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time.